AI is sold as an ethereal, weightless cloud. You type a prompt, and a digital neural network seems to pull answers out of thin air. But the physical reality slams into heavy industrial infrastructure. For decades, internet servers sat in localized data centers or small rooms inside office buildings. But the computing requirements for artificial intelligence have pushed that architecture to its physical limits. This is a hyperscale facility. These sprawling, fortress-like campuses are densely packed with servers and the massive rooftop cooling units required to keep them running. The race for AI dominance is physically rewiring the U.S. power grid, draining regional aquifers, and permanently reshaping land use. To understand the true resource demands of the AI boom, we need to build a conceptual hyperscale campus from the ground up, tracing exactly what goes into the system and what comes out. Computing demands of generative AI have forced a sudden leap in the scale of digital infrastructure. We have moved past the era of individual server buildings and into a period of gigawatt-scale campuses that function as industrial utilities. The speed of this transition is outpacing regulatory frameworks. State and local zoning boards are processing these developments using rules written for a much smaller, slower internet. Mapping this shift is necessary because the resource costs of the AI boom aren't paid by algorithms, they are paid by local communities. The foundation of a hyperscale campus is the server rack. Generative AI hardware runs continuously, and pushing these processors to their operational limits generates immense concentrated heat. If that heat isn't removed instantly, the servers melt down. This diagram shows a closed-loop water cooling system. Water circulates directly through the server racks, absorbs the thermal energy, and physically transports that heat away from the processors and out to external cooling towers. Here is the physical reality of those external cooling towers. They require thick, interconnected metal piping to handle the immense volume of heated water constantly flowing out of the server rooms. A single large facility can consume up to 5 million gallons of water every day to maintain this cooling cycle. That is the exact daily water usage of a town with 16,000 households. Since 2022, roughly 2/3 of all new data centers have been built or planned in regions already facing severe water stress. The Phoenix, Arizona metropolitan area highlights this mismatch perfectly. The region is actively managing drought conditions, yet it has become one of the densest hubs for hyperscale development in the country. This chart tracks direct water use for cooling by data centers in the Phoenix area. Current consumption sits at 385 million gallons per year. Based on incoming AI facilities, projected demand scales up to 3.7 billion gallons annually. That demand draws directly from the broader regional water crisis facing the Colorado River Basin. Reservoir levels have plummeted over the last 2 decades, leaving stranded boat holes on dry, cracked lake beds. Municipalities in these regions are allocating their finite, life-sustaining water reserves to cool the hardware that runs global tech algorithms. Along with water, hyperscale development requires vast amounts of physical space. Developers have shifted from purchasing single commercial buildings to banking 1,000-acre rural parcels to allow for phased, multi-building campus construction. This land acquisition frequently intersects with established communities. These massive gray concrete structures are being built immediately adjacent to residential neighborhoods, converting quiet areas into industrial zones. This map illustrates the planned footprint of Meta's Hyperion campus in Louisiana. The 3,650-acre boundary is large enough to completely engulf the 843 acres of New York Central Park and the 1,500 acres of the New Orleans airport simultaneously. Once the land is secured, the campus must ensure what the industry calls 100% uptime. Cloud infrastructure cannot go offline during grid failures, which mandates the installation of extensive on-site power generation. To achieve this, operators place massive diesel or natural gas generators directly along the campus perimeter. While often designated for emergency use, these units frequently function as primary power sources to keep servers running when the electrical grid cannot meet the load. The exhaust from these generators degrades local air quality. They emit high levels of fine particulate matter and nitrogen oxides, pollutants firmly linked to respiratory disease and asthma in nearby communities. At the XAI Colossus facility in Memphis, developers are installing over 30 natural gas turbines intended for daily use. This places continuous industrial emissions into a city that already battles high asthma rates and poor environmental health. Hyperscale campuses do not passively occupy space. Their physical sprawl and operational exhaust actively degrade the environmental baselines of their host communities. Beyond the generators, the campus must plug into the macroelectrical grid. The power draw is staggering. A single large AI facility can require up to 5 gigawatts of electricity, the equivalent output of multiple nuclear reactors. This map tracks data centers in Northern Virginia. This dense cluster is known as Data Center Alley, the national epicenter of this electrical strain, where nearly 600 facilities are currently operating. Looking just at the top 6 facilities in this cluster, their combined electrical demand hits 781 megawatts. That is enough power to run a small city, concentrated into just 6 specific buildings. To supply this energy, utility monopolies rely on an economic mechanism called cost socialization. The legacy utility model distributes the capital cost of building new infrastructure across the entire ratepayer base. When utilities build new transmission lines and power plants specifically to support these tech campuses, the expenditures are added to the monthly electric bills of everyday households and local businesses. This hits citizens living in regions with high data center density directly. In some areas, electricity prices have jumped 267% over the past 5 years to cover these grid upgrades. The financial numbers translate to raw physical construction. Dirt sites and heavy machinery are carving out new high-voltage pathways to connect these private data centers to the public grid. Without specific regulatory interventions, everyday citizens are unwittingly serving as the primary financial underwriters for the physical expansion of trillion-dollar tech conglomerates. A gap in public transparency prevents communities from accurately preparing for the arrival of these campuses. Local residents often lack access to the basic resource data required to evaluate a project's long-term impact. Developers frequently require local officials to sign non-disclosure agreements during the zoning phase. These NDAs legally hide the project's physical scale, water requirements, and power draw from the public until the deal is finalized. A civic countermovement is now forming. Local governments in several states are successfully imposing temporary moratoria on new developments, freezing zoning approvals to force developers into open negotiations. This flowchart models the primary policy solution: implementing dedicated energy rate classes. By splitting the grid into distinct billing pathways for residential households and hyperscale industrial users, residential bills remain permanently insulated from the cost of data center infrastructure upgrades. Environmental policy solutions follow the same logic, mandating on-site clean power generation, requiring battery storage instead of diesel generators, and forcing the use of reclaimed wastewater ensures the facility handles its own resource consumption. These specific regulations accomplish one essential task. They shift the financial and environmental risks off the taxpayer and place them squarely back onto the developers building the campus. The physical expansion of AI infrastructure is a global certainty. We will build more hyperscale campuses. But a system that allows private resource costs to be absorbed by the public is a policy choice. Data centers will only deliver shared prosperity when civic priorities and hard policy constraints force the AI boom to pay its own physical way.